Yerushalayim, the holiest, most special city in the world, is described in the Torah in Chumash Devarim as Hamakom Asher Yivchar Hashem L'Shakein Shemo Sham. It is the place, Har Bayis in Yerushalayim, that Hashem picked out of the entire world to rest His Shechina in the first Beis HaMikdash, the second Beis HaMikdash, and Emir Hashem B'Karov Yameinu, the third Beis HaMikdash. But interestingly, the Torah doesn't identify where this Makom Asher Yivchar Hashem L'Shakein Shemo Sham is. The Torah just says in the future where Hashem will choose. But historically, how did that happen? How did Hashem choose Yerushalayim as the place for His Shechina? So interestingly, we read in Sefer Shmuel that David HaMelech, when he took over from Shaul, reigned, he had his capital in Hebron for 7 years. Because all the representatives of all the Shvatim came to David and asked him to be their king and anointed him, appointed him king in Hebron. 7 years later, David decided to begin planning a Beit HaMikdash, to bring the Aron HaBrit, the Aron HaKodesh, to a special place which would be the spiritual and political capital of Am Yisrael, and brought it to Yerushalayim. Why did he choose Yerushalayim? What made David HaMelech pick what was then a non-Jewish city inhabited by a nation called Yevusim to be his capital and to be the Makom Asher Yivchar Hashem? Some Mefarshim suggest, the Rambam, Mor Nevuchim, and others, that he had some sort of Masorah, and the Torah Sheba'al Peh that was in his hands told him that Yerushalayim was a special place, that perhaps that was the location of Akedat Yitzchak. Perhaps that was where Adam Harishon was created and brought a korban. So perhaps he was merely working off his Masorah. However, the Malbim suggests a deeper explanation. Throughout Jewish history, there had been tension between the different Shvatim, the different tribes. Maybe now we would call them sects or political parties, the different types of Jews. From the very beginning of the Jewish people, Yaakov's sons fought with each other, the Bnei Leah and the Bnei Rachel. Throughout the period of Sefer Shoftim, if we read the book of Shoftim, we see the different Shvatim, best case scenario, not getting along and not helping one another, worst case scenario, actually warring against one another. And in Sefer Shmuel, first Shaul is appointed king from the Shevet of Binyamin, and then somehow there's some coup, and Hashem switches the leadership to Shevet Yehuda and anoints David HaMelech. You can only imagine the tension between Binyamin and Yehuda over who would be king, who is the most important Shevet, who is the leader, perhaps going all the way back in history to Yaakov's family and Yosef and Binyamin against Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. You can imagine what politics must have been like in those days. What did David HaMelech decide? By all logic, if you asked any contemporary politician, he should have kept the capital of the state of Israel in Hebron. He should have kept it in his tribe of Yehuda and consolidated power in the hands of the leaders of Yehuda. But David made a bold, brave move. He said, if I'm really king of Am Yisrael, a king of Am Yisrael can't be a king of one faction of Am Yisrael. Can't represent one sect or one political party or one hashkafa or one type of Jew. A king means someone who equally represents all kinds of Jews and transcends his sectarian identity. And therefore he picked the two Shvatim that were most at odds with each other, Yehuda and Binyamin, and found one city which is exactly on the border of Yehuda and Binyamin. Chazal tell us a few places in Shas that Yerushalayim and Har Bayis was exactly on the borderline of Yehuda and Binyamin, and this is very clear in the Psukim in Sefer Yoshua, where they list the borders and the cities of each Shevet's inheritance, where Yerushalayim is listed on the border of Yehuda and on the border of Binyamin. It was exactly the no man's land between them. David HaMelech says, you know what, there are two Shvatim fighting. There are a lot of Jews who have trouble getting along. Let me put my capital exactly in between them to make the statement that I'm not the king representing one kind of Jew or another kind of Jew, but I equally represent all kinds of Jews, that all Jews are equal, and that all parts of the Jewish people are equally important. With that bold move, establishing his capital in Yerushalayim, he had the zechus of picking the right place, The Navi came and told him, you picked right, this is the Makom Asher Yivchar Hashem. If this is what you believe leadership and kingship is, if this is what you believe Jewish peoplehood is, then this is where Hashem chooses to rest his Shekhinah. It was certainly not an easy decision on David's part. Later in David's life, the saddest, the most tragic episode in his life is clearly the rebellion, the Mered Avshalom, when his beloved son and many of his trusted advisors and friends and colleagues and allies rebelled against him. Interestingly, where did Avshalom begin his rebellion? In the city of Hebron. He got all the leaders of Hebron to join him in attempting to depose his father. One can speculate that why did Avshalom find such fertile ground for rebellion in Hebron? Probably the elders of Hebron were very resentful. You can imagine the party leaders, how resentful they'd be if their candidate, imagine, candidate of one political party, won 100% of the vote and decided to make a national unity government instead of a party-led government. Imagine how the people in his party would feel. No doubt David paid a very harsh price, a very difficult and tragic personal price for his bold decision. He suffered a lot because of his decision to prefer and to prioritize Achdus over sectarianism and tribalism. But that's what made him David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam. That's what made him the eternal king of the Jewish people, the progenitor of the entire line of Malchus, and ultimately the Melech HaMashiach. Let's continue the story. Move from the time of Tanakh to the time of Chazal. In the time of Chazal, the identities of the Shvatim had been lost in the sands of history. But there were different kinds of Jews. There were Chaverim, there were Amei Haaretz, there were the frummer Jews, quote unquote, the less from Jews, those who were more makbid, less makbid, and they had a lot of trouble getting along. How do you eat food from someone who's not so careful about the halachas of kashrus? How do you trust someone who's not so careful about the laws of Tumah V'Tara? Throughout the land of Israel and the diaspora, and throughout the year, this caused a lot of tension between the different religious classes of the Jewish people. But Chazal told us in Chagiga that there's one exception to this division among the Jewish people. And a justified division, after all. How are you supposed to get along so well if everyone has different levels of observance and halachic standards? But nonetheless, somehow, they managed to find a halachic solution for Aliyah L'Regel in Yerushalayim. 3 times a year, when all the Jews came together, they came to Yerushalayim. Chazal said, the Amei Haaretz Nemanim al Hataros. Everyone could eat everyone's food. Everyone could share their utensils and trust everyone else. We all somehow were considered the same religiously and shared the same standard through the magic of Yerushalayim. The Yerushalmi explains, how could this be? What magic did Yerushalayim have that allowed us at the time of Aliyah L'Regel to erase and transcend and ignore our religious differences? Says the pasuk says, Yerushalayim habnuya ki ir shechubra la yachdav. Yerushalayim is ir shechubra la, chaver, a city of coming together. Ir shenasu b'kol Yisrael chaverim, a city that makes all Jews chaverim, which has a double meaning. In the pshat, friends, together, litchaber, and the technical halachic meaning, chaverim, those who have the highest religious standards, those in the highest religious class. Somehow Yerushalayim has the power, and will leave the halachic technicalities to all the Mefarshim would deal with exactly how it worked. But we know how it worked. David HaMelech found this power in Yerushalayim. It has the power to help us transcend our differences, even when there are halachic challenges, even when there are good reasons for our differences. It has the power to help us transcend those differences and find unity. Chazal tell us in Gemara Brachos that wherever you are in the world, when you daven, you face Yerushalayim. If you're in South Africa, you face north. If you're in New York, you face east. If you're in China, you face west. We all face Yerushalayim. Why? On one level, no doubt, it's because Ein Zeh Ki Im Beis Elokim V'Zeh Shara Shamayim. Somehow the gateway for our prayers to reach heaven is found in Yerushalayim, in the Makom HaMikdash. But the Gemara in Brachos, Daf Lamed, emphasizes something else. It says we find whoever's in the south faces north, whoever's in the north faces south, whoever's in the east faces west, and the west faces east. Nimtzu Kol Yisrael Machavnas Liban L'Makom Echad. We find all the Jews are not just facing, but their hearts are facing the same direction. somehow whenever we daven, and we daven in so many different ways, not only do we live in different countries in the four corners of the earth, but each of us have our own style of davening and our own type of shul that we go to, and we don't go to the other type of shul. But somehow when we daven and face Yerushalayim, we remind ourselves that we're all really, our hearts are all miskavein, our hearts are all facing the same direction, our hearts are all going in the same direction. We're really one at heart, even though there are so many differences that divide us externally. To me, one of the most amazing things about Yerushalayim is seeing the diversity of types of Jews that you encounter here, that perhaps we might not find in our local young Israel or Shtibel or wherever we live. Even I live in a small town not far from Yerushalayim, but all the Jews are more or less the same. I go to Yerushalayim, you have Sfardim and Ashkenazim and Teimanim and Bukharim and Russians and Hasidim and Misnagdim and Masorati and Dati Leumi, and all. This is only the tip of the iceberg of the kind of Jews you find, each of which have something so special about what they have to offer me. And my favorite part of Yerushalayim is going to the Kotel, because unfortunately, for better or for worse, that's regular life. I usually daven in my own local shul with Jews who are more or less exactly like me. I go to the Kotel. There are Jews who are, putting on a kippah for the first time in 6 months. There are Jews with shtreimels. There are Jews, a minyan, Jews with shtreimels, and Jews with army uniforms davening in the same minyan. Where do you get to see that but the Kotel? And of course, only in the Kotel, because everywhere else, we make our own shuls in our own neighborhoods and build our own walls. But there's only one Yerushalayim, only one Makom HaMikdash. So we all go there and daven together. It's a unique experience for me to go to the Kotel and daven with all the Jews and realize that even though we love to focus on what divides us, we should be focusing a little more on what's really deep, is that which unites us. On Yom Yerushalayim, we celebrate this year the 51st anniversary of the unification of Yerushalayim. We unified Western and Eastern Yerushalayim in the 6-Day War. But really, it's perhaps the 3,000th anniversary of the unification of Yerushalayim, of David HaMelech finding the power of unification by establishing Yerushalayim as our capital and making a statement and telling us for the next 3,000 years that what's important is not our Dalet Amos of the Jewish people, but the whole Jewish people. And when we go to Yerushalayim, when we think of Yerushalayim, when we daven towards Yerushalayim, we remind ourselves to transcend our affiliations, our class, our sect, our tribe, our type of Jew, and remember that ultimately the Shechina only rests on Makom Sheyivchar Hashem L'Shakein Shmo Sham when we come together and realize our unity as the Jewish people.